Welcome guys to the new video on Team Question. Today I have a new video for you guys, and it's a premium deck profile for Shadow Paladin this time. So I will be going over my Shadow Paladin deck list from the premium format, where it's actually around Luard. So Luard got the name of grade 3 of course, with the force marker, and I'm going to show you guys my list with the whole G and everything. So I played Luard in the Giro already when Luard was introduced, of course. Then I got the Dragfall deck at the end of the GPT-14 set. I played it a lot, played in the premium format almost for the entire 3 years it's been, and I'm really happy to now have a new Luard with a force marker, so we can play around that and still have the Luard name. So if you guys are interested, I would highly like it. I would highly advise to just watch this video to the end, because I will be going over every single card while I play it, and hopefully you guys also like it a lot. Before, of course, I'm playing the one starter, just general starter. Draws you a card, gives you a quick shoot. I think it's almost being power crapped enough that the new starters are far better than the old starters, but most of them you're just playing the newest one just because it gives a lot of consistency and everything like that. Then we're already starting off with the boss unit itself. It's the 4 copies of the Luard, and it's Drag Drive Luard, so not Drag Hard. The reason why we're playing the Drag Drive Luard is because he has an on-play skill where on-plays counter +1, search deck for a grade 1, equal to the amount of Luards in your soul +1, so you can always search out one grade 1 from your deck and call it. And if you have a Luard in soul, you can even call 2 or more, depending on how many Luards you have in your soul. And then when he attacks, he gains 5k for every grade 1 on the field. It doesn't come up often because you're often going to stride over it, but the on-play skill is really nice. And why we play the Drag Drive Luard and not the Drag Hard Luard in this deck is just because Drag Hard Luard needs you to go first, but how I made this list is that you actually go first, superior right, going to grade 3 immediately, and stride the second turn you hit grade 3. So with that, you don't really need to play around Drag Hard Luard, of course, and the fact that your stride turns are more impactful than 2 grade 3s in your soul means a lot in this deck. And for the rest, we're playing just the 4 copies of Drag Drive Luard to have that Luard name, of course. So that's why I'm playing 4 copies, no Drag Hard Luards in this sense, and it's just here for the name sake of this deck. And those are not the only grade 3s I'm playing in this deck, because I also play 2 copies of Phantom Blast Dragon in this deck. Those are extra grade 3s, so it's a little bit nicer if you don't hit the Drag Drive Luard, of course, because those are only 4 copies. But I also play them just because you need them for the Superior Right engine, and it's also nice to have 2 copies because you need to have them from your deck to Superior Right. So if you have it on hand, you already break in that sense if you're only playing one, so that's why I play 2 copies. Also, it's a nice addition to having an extra stride font in this deck, so that's why I play 2 copies of it. And for the rest, his skill doesn't matter because his skill will be not be activatable when you Superior Right into him. Then for the grade 2, I'm playing 2 Dampwood, almost the same reason. He's 5k unit, and it can search out 2 other cards in this deck, and those are the Blessed Darks. So almost the same reason why I play 2 copies as the same as Phantom Blessed Dragon. You need those for the Superior Right engine. And what's also important is you need to have Dampwood on your hand. But Blessed Dark you don't necessarily need to, or I mean in your deck of course, but you don't necessarily need Blessed Dark in your deck to function with, because if you draw it, you want to have it as your Vanguard, right? So having to play 1 copy is also sort of fine, but playing the 2 copies is bad in my opinion, because you want to filter your deck as much as possible in the late stages of the game. So if you have a second one of this, you can search out the second copy of the Blessed Dark also, and with that you search or you filter your deck even more and have the more consistent right to your Superior Right, of course. For the rest, these are these can be considered vanilla. It doesn't really matter which one you play. I just like to play the old version. Then for the magical grade 2 that does all the work, it's 4 copies of Tech Down. What he essentially does is when he attacks, if you have Ritual 5 and GB active, you can retire 1 of your grade 1 or lower rear guards and search 2 grade 1s from your deck and call them. So an attack extender in that way. Not once per turn restricted, so if you can resend it, you can activate the skill a second time. And for the rest, it's just a nice reason to have. It's not like an Ember clone where it needs to be boosted, so if you get a stand trigger, for example, you can immediately use the skill again. And that's where the win on this deck, on this card lies, in the ability to make multi-attacks and go for high numbers in this deck. Then I also play 2 copies of Drag Wizard Noise. I play this as 2 copies because it's a card that doesn't cost any resource to make advantage for you, because you can go out and grade 1 or lower from your deck, or not from your deck, from the top 5 I mean. So it's not that consistent, but it's still free advantage you get. Can give you some free ritual in that sense, because you want to have a high ritual count for this deck to function. Also needs ritual tree on itself, so if you want to activate it, be aware of that. You cannot start with this card to make ritual if you don't have the ritual tree in the option, of course. And for the rest, if you're going first, your opponent doesn't usually give you resource or counter list to work with. So that's why this card shines, because you're going into alternative strikes, but you need a little bit of a board to pressure it. So calling down a Drag Wizard Noise makes it so you get an extra boost, or maybe an attack in that way, so you can pressure even though you don't have any counter blast. And it puts the unit back on the bottom of your deck at the end of the turn. So you call out a powerful grade 1, you get some extra power at the end of turn, you put it back into the deck so you can go out the next turn, so you gain his power effect a second time. Then for the 4 copies that almost everyone will play in standard, premium, whatever format, I think is the 4 copies of Skull Witch the main. Really happy that she's being reprinted in the clan selection, of course, because it's an expensive card that just needs as many reprints as it does. For her skill, you can rest her and then search out your deck for any 5k, so that Boot Dragon, which I showed for earlier. Nice to have, make extra bonus on the field, because you can of course sack or retire the rested rear guards that are left behind to give you some extra advantage back. So very good card to have. It's almost mandatory that you need it in your opening hand, but if you're going first, because it enables the entire Spirit engine on its own. If you have one grade 1 on your hand, you almost want to more than go 4 if you don't see it. It depends a little bit on your situation. So playing 4 copies almost undeniable. You need to have 4 copies of this deck, or 4 copies of this card. Then the card that enables Spirit are the 2 Freezing Rage Dandy. If you Vanguard, it's Blizzard Dark, so that's why you want to go out early. Then put second zone, search for the Blizzard Dark, Dandy manual, so you can superior into the Phantom Blizzard Dragon, and disables its act ability. So that's a little bit important about it. But for the rest, what this card essentially does is give you an extra drive check, give you an extra marker if you go first, so it makes it so you'll get first strike all the time. And filter your deck even more. So it does 4 incredible things in one single card, and I think it's that powerful. I just want to play 2 copies, so I don't want to whiff the Spirit, of course, because the Spirit is so important in the deck, gives you so much advantage, gives you so much centrum, you can't miss it. Then playing 4 copies of Drag Saver Ezra's. I'm playing 4 copies of it because the new Luard, of course, lost the ability to put grade 1s back into the deck when you want to strike. So we really need the grade 1s that send themselves back into the deck, so we can call them out with Dark Claw later, and we can't rely on anything else. So self-fulfilling card makes it so you can retire your rested mains, gives you some advantage back, and set up your deck. And for the rest, it's a recurring PG, so it's also nice in that you can guard against very high attacks quite easily. But this deck is a little bit problematic to play when you're playing against a clan that goes for a lot of small attacks above the 23k mark. That's the worst part about this deck. But still, you can go for the early striker, try to kill them immediately, so you don't have to worry about that. So 4 copies of Track Save Ashras, and then the 4 copies of the Beat Stick in this deck, and that's Blue Espada Dragon. It's a little bit weird that you play this card just because you don't play the Claret Sword engine, but the reason why that is because Ritual is so important in the deck. You really want to excavate the top 3 cards of your deck to achieve the higher Ritual count. and with that you have some powerful strike turns. Also it gains power on itself and it's a growth 1, so it's easy searchable, and it doesn't cost any resource, it's just one place. So what this card makes great is it cannot be denied by your opponent, and that's the primary reason why you play it. We can also play some older great ones that you use a counter blast, isn't that restrictive, everything like that. But this card is just the easiest to access to and the easiest to get advantage of, so that's why we're playing 4 copies of it. And during deck out we can just call up 2 of those in the same column and already swing in for the 36k column in itself, so that's why we're playing 4 copies of this. Then we still need a little bit of counter charge. Almost everything in this deck uses counter blast, except for your Spirit Engine, so we're playing 2 copies of Sharon to give us the counter blast back for Soul Blast. Usually I already excavated one during my strike turns, but I can call the other one out with Doctor to give me the counter blast back. By the way, also a little note on the plus Paladin, which I forgot to talk about. Plus Paladin is that his excavate top 3 is mandatory. So if you go first, you need to write it. You're already excavating the top 3 cards, so that's why I want to play every superior card 2 times to make sure I don't, even if I excavate 1 card from them, I still have it to my disposal. And then 2 copies of Sharon to make for the counter charge. Then I play 1 copy of Drag Wizard Vicro. Gives me that counter charge, but it's searchable by the main because it's a 5k unit. It's a little bit restrictive in that way, in the sense that it needs to be killed off my ritual bit, but it's not that big of a problem. Deck that can kill it, Astros can kill it, even strike units can. This card makes it searchable out with the main, so you get it counters back without paying counterless. But what usually happens with Sharon, of course, is that for him to come out, it's a great one, you need to pay a counterblast. So this gives you a free counter charge in that way, and this refunds you that counterblast. So that's a big difference to acknowledge. And that's why we're playing 1 copy of it. Then we're playing with the 4 Curse and Raven, and a recurring stand that puts itself back into the deck. So what usually happens is only first or second strike. What already happens is that you're thinned so much through your deck here that you're only left with only 10 cards or something like that. Curse and Raven tries to snipe out the normal units from your deck, and puts itself back, so you deck a lot with it. And if you filter your deck even more with units such as Dacta, you can go for an immense powerful strike turn where you can go for a possible 7 attacks if you hit 2 stands. But you usually don't need the full combo, because if you hit force 2 under a rear guard, you only need to most of the time hit 2 to 3 times. So that's why I play 4 copies, and I think it's really mandatory to play this at 4. But that's not the only stand triggers we play. I will put a little bit on the side, because we also play 2 copies of Crafting. Crafting is just here to have an extra stand trigger in the deck, and what she makes is a little bit from Paladin Owl from the past, where you get a card draw of it when it's being sacked. This is also true for this card, but you check the top 2 for it. So if you really need a specific card from your deck, you check the top 2 instead of drawing the top card, of course. It's a little bit worse also in the sense that it's not recyclable, unlike Abyssal Owl or Belau Owl, and the fact that it needs to be placed on hand and then being sacked, but it's a stand trigger, and that's more important than ever in this deck. So even though it has a little bit of a worse effect, or maybe even a little bit of a different effect than Abyssal Owl or Belau Owl, I mean, the fact that it's a stand is more important than having a better effect. And then I'm playing just 4 Sentinel Crits for the sake of having Sentinel Crits, because we're playing a low count of Great Trees, so we need them. 2 also crits that go into the soul for the sake that we have extra shield value and gives us 10k defensive. And then I play 4 copies of the heal triggers. Heals are very important in almost every single deck that you play, so 4 copies is a staple. So that rounds up the trigger lineup, and we can go over to the G-Zone, where I begin to play 2 track Abyss Luard. I really like those. makes it so I can make some advantage on the board, but also makes it so I have some power to the front row when I have some hit GB3. Mufasa, the card that wants to have the GB3 active, or not GB3 active, Ritual 10 active, gives you a lot of power to the front row, an extra critical, and the Guard of 6 where you go for the Battle Dory effect. And it also self-fulfilling where with the first skill you can sack 2, then draw 2 cards, and then your great zeros that are tracker units are considered great ones in your drop zone. Then 3 copies of Helheim. This is a card that I like to play whenever I'm being damage denied, because with his skill you pressure a lot on your opponent that they need to take a lot of damage and try to guard Vanguard. But when you are going first and go for the superiority and you stride on their grade 2, 28k against a 10k or 9k base is so powerful that they need to PG almost all of it, or this card or this attack, and that's essentially the same as hitting for this the purpose of skill. Then one chain ranker, it's here for the extra guard restrict on top of the guard restrict Professor brings. So if you need more of guard restrict, this is the card that you want to play. Dragobist is here if you want to have more power in the front row and make a little bit of advantage, and Professor is the general better card than all of these, because he has a more powerful effect, but these bring more options to the table if you want to emphasize one or the other from the same effect. And then Ultima, the ultimate master of all. So he sets you aboard just like Dragobist, but specific cards, so you don't have the whole shenanigans that you don't see the perfect card you want. Doesn't bring you a guard restrict, but sets up your top of your deck perfectly. So also sort of power buff to your front row. So if you are emptied, you don't have any rare cards on your field left, you don't have any cards on your hand left, and then Ultima is the better choice to go for, because Mufasa only is good when you already have a field. Dragobist is also good if you have some, if you have already your grade 2 in your field, which is Dagda. If you don't, Dragobist doesn't really do that much. Generic also needs a field, so these all require a great field to work with. Dragobist is the only one that can make a sort of a field on itself, but not that big. And Ultima is the biggest card that makes the best field possible. And then for the G cards, I'm playing 2 copies of Plotmaker. Almost gives a free 10k shield for you to guard with. To the Jellido, gives you the shield value of the great ones you called early, and even draws you a card. So Mufasa sacks those and draws you 2 cards, but Jellido also makes use of their defensive capabilities in the fact that they have 10k shields. One Rectum I play to go for the higher ritual count without paying any cost for it. Also in the later stages, you don't want to have your grade 2s on your hand, because hitting one deck is far enough. Hitting 2 deck doesn't really do anything to your field, so ditching those for important pieces is also really nice. And then one Darkfall Dragon is the biggest G card you can get, but needs a lot of setup, so we are only playing 1 copy, just for the fact that it needs a lot of setup to work with. So hopefully you guys see how I built this deck. If you guys played another iteration of this deck, that's also perfectly fine if you're confident with that, but this is how I tend to play it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Comment down below if you have any questions about this deck, and hopefully you guys I see you in the next video. Goodbye.